From the salmon people, we're the people of the tide. The people describe ourselves as Tehobscheth. It means that to be a person of the tide means that everything that you do is connected with everything around you, and you spend your whole life learning how to become a person of the tide. And so I'll get more into that a little bit later, but before I continue, I want to raise my hands, say Tigwitzi, thank you for having me here. That's how we do where I'm from. We raise our hands to people that we respect, and we raise our hands in thanksgiving. Where I'm from, we don't clap. Actually, we believe when we clap, it sends the spirit away. It's what we do in our ceremonies to send the spirit home. So where we're from, when we thank somebody, we raise our hands to them. We say Tigwitzi. Everybody try it. Say Tigwitzi. Oh, you guys are so good. You guys did that so well. I want to show you something. Try this. Put your arms out like this. Lock your elbows, put one palm up, and then go like this as fast as you can. Yeah, that's good. You guys are like all athletic. You guys have strong fingers. Faster. Good, good. No cramping. You guys are like, need to work out those fingers. You guys are texting all the time, tweeting, Instagramming. Your fingers are tired. Switch. Good, very good, very good, students. Now try this. Go like this. Feel that. You feel that? That's cool, huh? That's your energy. That's the energy that moves through your body all the time, your spirit, if you will. Make it bigger. Feel that? Bring it smaller. That's cool, huh? Bless yourselves. I feel grateful. Feel grateful to be alive. How cool. Do it again. Do it again. Faster. 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 Good. You guys are so good. Thank you. Faster. Switch. 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 Like this. Yeah, now go like this. Find the person next to you. Share energy with them. Here. Feel that? That's cool, huh? Can you feel it? That's crazy, huh? That's collective energy. That's what happens when we sit down and we interact with a person that's near us. We begin sharing energy and affecting their spirit before we even say anything. Now go like this. Yeah. Fast. Real fast. Good. Up high. Good. Take a deep breath. Lock your elbows. Good. Find your energy. Good. Feel it? You got it? There now. Bless the people around you. Bless the people around you. Good. Say Tigwitzi. Tigwitzi. Ah, good job. Good job. You guys are so good. All right. That's what we do that in all of our ceremonies. We do that in our longhouses and our traditional ways. It's a normal thing for us. And we do that because we're acknowledging the collective spirit in the room. We acknowledge the power of a good mind. We acknowledge that our spirit is affecting the people around us. So before we can have conversations and before we can actually make decisions and move forward in a good way, either politically or socially or in a spiritual way, we first have to acknowledge the collective spirit in the room and acknowledge where we are. And so it's like we take a moment to center ourselves and acknowledge that we're here right now. And so we're going to do like we do in the old ways. We're going to bring our hearts and minds together, and we're going to see if we can find some solutions moving forward so that we can actually feel safe and happy and comfortable and be of a good mind and a good heart. And there's this idea, this peacemaker's idea. It's a Haudenosaunee principle. Haudenosaunee are the 6 nations in New York. And so in New York, they're also called the Iroquois. But a long time ago, like 9,000 years ago, all the tribes in the Northeast were at war. It was really ugly. They say that people were backwards walkers, that they didn't remember how to be of a good mind. They didn't remember how to be of a good heart. They didn't remember how to have a good spirit. And things were so backwards that they were cannibals. It was so backwards. People were so afraid of one another that they'd go from one territory to the next territory, and there was no peace. So if you left your territory, you'd be killed right away. And that's when the peacemaker was born. And when the peacemaker was born, he came really quickly. The peacemaker came in 4 moon cycles. And so when he was born, the grandmother took him out to kill him. She tried to bury him, and she put him into the ground. And she came back to her house, and he was in his arms, his mama's arms. So she tried to burn him. And when she put him in the fire, she watched him burn. She came back to the house and he was in his mama's arms. And then she tried to drown him. Like, she was not giving up, trying to kill this baby. And finally the medicine man came to her and said, look, this is not working. What you're doing is not working. This is a really special child. We're going to need this child. And even though this child is different than us and we don't understand this child, we're going to need this child. So this story, the Peacemaker story, it's a super long story. It takes 2 weeks to tell the story. It really does. They tell it in August up in Iroquois country, in Akwesasne or Onondaga or Cayuga or Seneca. And they tell the story of the peacemaker going to all the 6 nations. And what the peacemaker does is he uses spiritual logic and spiritual reason to encourage the people to be of a good mind and to be of a good heart, to bring their hearts and minds together to work with one another for peace. And in order for there to be peace in the 6 nations, all of the 6 nations had to make a decision to lay down their weapons. At the Great Tree of Peace, they had to lay down their weapons or there could never be peace between the 6 nations. So I'm going to get more into that later, and I don't know why I was telling that story, except to tell you about the principle of Ganakganawehio, which is how to be of a good mind. So from the northeast all the way over to the northwest, all the way down here to Seminole country, we have ways of identifying that spiritual logic and spiritual reason so that we can be peacemakers amongst one another. Something I think we could all learn from, especially right now. So, I didn't come here to talk to you about that though. I came here to talk to you about my project. So, I'm currently working on this project. So this Wi-Fi is not very good. I'm currently working on this project called Project 562. So what happened was 5 years ago I was teaching at a tribal school on my res. This is how I do my project. I live in that big girl right there. I'm not the big girl the RV, okay? And I've been traveling in this for like 5 years. And before I started this project, I was a teacher. I taught at a tribal school on my res. I taught at like 12 different tribal schools. Thank you. And what I began to realize while I was teaching, it was this sort of realization over and over and over again. I realized that the American dream didn't include us as Native people. That when Lincoln said for the people, he meant those that were actually considered human beings at the time. I came to understand that the core of our curriculum is not based in truth, that it doesn't acknowledge our indigenous principles. If it did, you would have learned things like, I don't know what this is doing. Let's see. Like this, like Ganakganawehio, how to be of a good mind. Where becoming a peacemaker or seed keeper or land steward is held at the highest esteem. You would have learned about interconnectedness. You, by this point in your life, would have already learned principles of how to steward the land in which you grew up in. You would have learned how to deal with the things inside of you, those demons like fear and anxiety and resentment in a spiritual, logical way, so that we had less of our young people feeling lost and confused. You would learn how to walk in light and love and beauty. And that would be at the core of your curriculum, but that's not what we do in this country. What we do is we reiterate false narratives, like the telling of Columbus discovering America, who in fact never landed in North America. We still gather each year like we did last week for Thanksgiving, and we retell the story of the Indians welcoming the Pilgrims, as though we would want to elect new presidents like Donald Trump. The funny thing about Thanksgiving is, in fact, Mama Sowet, who is the leader of the Wampanoag people, where the first Thanksgiving actually took place, Mama Sowet actually went to the Pilgrims because they were shooting their guns voraciously into the air because they were super excited because they had caught some deer and they were starving, and so they were drunk and celebrating and shooting their guns. And the Wampanoags came over like, yo, you can't just shoot guns into the air. We've been in war for 40 years and we just signed the treaty last month, and so if you're shooting guns, we think that it means more war. So y'all are gonna have to chill out. And the Pilgrims said, we're sorry, here, have some dinner. And there wasn't actually turkey at that dinner. So like how we got to this idea of like the Thanksgiving story is so far beyond me. But the way that narrative has shaped our understandings of this country, that the way that storytelling has impacted our ability to have equality and our ability to actually feel safe in communities like this, that storytelling, the narrative shaping, is really what we're here to discuss today. So I think that our American historical amnesia has enabled us to forget the ways in which this country was built, you know, on the backs of slaves on stolen Indian land. And the truth is that while I was teaching, I actually laid to rest 19 of my own students. It was horrific. Like one day I would have beautiful, bright, smiling students like all of you in my classroom, and 3 days later I'd be at their funeral. It was so overwhelming. The toll of addiction and abuse and unnatural deaths, my God, it overwhelmed me. And after so much loss of potential, I remember I'd go to sit in lodges with my fellow teachers, and we would pray to the Creator and beg the Creator to help us. What are we doing wrong? What do we need to change? Help us. And it was during those couple of years, I think in 1 year I went to 67 funerals. And it was during that time that I realized that inequality, when we're discussing inequality, racial inequality, what we're discussing is body count and the right to safety of our bodies. And Ta-Nehisi Coates, who wrote Between the World and Me, who won, I think, did he win a Pulitzer last year? I think he says it best. All our phrasing, race relations, racial chasm, racial justice, racial profiling, white privilege, even white supremacy, it serves to obscure that racism is a visceral experience, that it dislodges brains, it blocks airways, it rips muscle, it extracts organs, it cracks bones, it breaks teeth. And we must never look away from this. We must always remember that the sociology, the graphs, the history, the economics, the charts, the regressions all land with great violence upon the body. And never more so have we known that to be the truth, except for in the last week when we've looked at what's happening in Standing Rock, North Dakota, to our Native brothers and sisters who have had their arms ripped off by rubber bullets fired by the police, who have been incarcerated and kept in freezing cold temperatures in dog kennels, bit by dogs and maced and sprayed, and the incredible inhumane treatment of peaceful protesters exercising their constitutional rights are being waylaid and sidecasted and treated in a way that does not even resemble the human rights that all of us are entitled to. So when I hit the road, when I made this decision to go on the road to create a new curriculum, to create books about the incredible variety of contemporary Native America, to visit all of the tribes, I did that because I had to. Because it's a labor of love that needs to happen, because I genuinely believe that until we change the narrative and participate in shifting our collective consciousness to recognize our indigenous communities, we will continue to see inhumane treatment of brown folks. Our people will keep going to jail. Our people will continue to be raped at exponential rates, and we'll keep putting our babies in the ground. And so until we participate in changing the narrative, all of us, that's not going to change. And you see, it has to change. It has to change. It's not okay. it's too much. It has to change. So, since November of 2012, I have touched down in every state. I've been to nearly 400 tribes. I've taken thousands of portraits and gathered as many oral narratives. I've grown and cried and been stifled by fear and loved and adventured and done it all over and over and over again so that eventually I could come to places like this and share stories with good minds like you. And man, it's been such a whirlwind of a journey. I mean, like, one time I caught the big girl on fire cooking bacon. And another time my brakes went out going over Yosemite, and I like swear I don't know how I died. And then like just 2 weeks ago I hit a deer in the big girl. Oh my God. But you know what? I did it all with this intention, you know, this purposeful intention that if I stay the course and actually manage to change the curriculum, that one day the experience will change for the people that I love so much. So it's really a great honor to be here with you. Tigwitsi, thank you for having me here. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And so I thought I'd share with you today some of the stories, some of the lessons, the hard-learned lessons that I've had to learn. You know, I'm not an academic. I'm not a scholar. I'm not a professor. I'm not a PhD, I'm an artist, and I believe in the power of storytelling. And so I'm going to tell you some of the things that I've learned, and I invite you to ask questions as I'm going. If you have any questions, you just raise your hand. I know it's weird, you don't want your friends to judge you, but if you have any questions, you can ask me, okay? I'm like your auntie up here. I prefer you think of me that way. So please do. So I'm going to go forward and tell you the most important lesson that I've learned is that we're all interconnected. In my travels, I've realized that we're more the same than we are different. I've been fortunate to go everywhere in the world. I've been on every continent. And I've been fortunate to know a lot of great people. And what I've found is that we all kind of want the same things. It doesn't matter where we come from. We're all trying to, you know, fall in love. We're all trying to get some food. We're all trying to feel safe. We're all trying to figure out our spirituality. And what I found is that when I arrive in a new place, I always feel kind of scared. It's always a little bit scary to go somewhere and not know anybody. And what I find is this incredible humanity and kindness and tolerance, even in the South or in places where I'm very different than other people. And I've also learned from our indigenous relatives that, that if we could learn from indigenous intelligence and start implementing that into our daily thought, interconnectedness might not be so far away from us. And the way that I think that we got away from believing that we were interconnected is actually by subscribing to the English language. So this is Kumo Ka'eo Izan. He's Kanaka Maoli. He's from the illegally occupied kingdom of Hawaii. And he took his picture here on the sacred mountain in Oahu. It was really interesting when we took this picture because you know, he's wearing his malo, which is the traditional outfit that men will wear in their communities to pray. And a malo is like, you know, it goes down in front like a loincloth, and then it's like a thong in the back. And we're in Hawaii, y'all. There's tourists everywhere, and we're in Oahu on top of this big mountain, and Kanaka Maolis don't have sovereignty. They don't have the right to local governmental control over their own communities. So in their most sacred places where they want to go to pray, they have to be there with all of the tourists that are also there. And so while we were up there making our prayers, tourists were coming by and taking our picture, and it was awkward. And I had this young assistant that was like 17, like, stop it, stop what you're doing. She was having like a little emotional breakdown. And anyway, we got the picture, so you don't know all that happened, and it's a beautiful picture. But Kumu, he taught me something super fascinating. He told me that there's an incredible distinction between indigenous languages and English. So the English language has nouns convey the meaning, right? We say there's a woman over there, or we say there's a man over there. But indigenous languages, most indigenous languages use what we would call verbing. So it sort of makes the meaning over here, or the meaning not separate from ourselves. So womaning is happening, or how are you manning today? You see, nouns, they separate us from the world. So it's very easy, right, for the psychology of Western philosophy to be totally separate. And I do believe that it's our sense of separatism that continues inequality itself. We say to ourselves, well, I'm not Latino, or I'm not black, or native, or poor, or transgender, or native. We say, that's not my family, that's not my community, that's not directly affecting my life. Therefore, I'm not required to take responsibility for that noun. However, indigenous language does not allow for that sense of separatism. Could you imagine the possibility for social change if we began integrating indigenous languages into popular consciousness? What if all of you had grown up living here in this community speaking Seminole? How would that have changed your reality? Could you imagine if we didn't see ourselves as separate from one another or the very earth that we live upon? What if this community college taught indigenous languages, 5 of them? How would that change our community? So, the truth is, right now and always, when walking in Turtle Island or North America, I'm on indigenous land. We are always on indigenous land. Why don't you say it with me? I am on indigenous land. We are on indigenous land. One more time. I am on indigenous land. We are on indigenous land. It feels weird saying that because we have been made to believe that we live in the United States of America, and the indigenous history of this place has been completely erased from our consciousness. It was done on purpose. So here's an example. How many of you can name 3 tribes in the United States? Raise your hands. Come on. 3? Are they Cherokee, Navajo, and Lakota? Choctaw? How many of you can name a dozen? Thank you. How many of you can name 50? How many of you can name 50 states in the United States? Failed that one? I know, I had such a hard time with that in 3rd grade. So that example is what we would call systemic racism. That's a microaggression. It's what the example of that is that when we get to places like this, it is required for us to study American history. Most of you probably took it in high school. Most of you were required to learn the geography of this nation from a Western perspective, but none of you were required to take Native American studies, African American studies, Asian American studies. Diversity in this country and in our education systems is an elective. If you choose to be culturally competent, then you will be, but you don't have to be. And that is how we get to a space of intolerance. There are over 567 federally recognized tribes in this United States. You live very close to indigenous people right now. You have a social responsibility to learn the indigenous history of the place that you occupy. Isn't that crazy? I learned that idea when I was here in Poliale in Hawaii. So this picture is taken on the most western side of Kauai. It's like the most western place you can go in the United States. Isn't it beautiful? Yeah, you're trying to go there and get a tan, huh? Wait, but you guys live in Florida. You guys are already tan, huh? You like read your books on the beach. Does that happen? I don't know. I went to college in Santa Barbara. I never went to the beach. But so I did like I always do when I go on vacation. You know what I mean? You get your bikini, you get your oil, you get your tan, you get your like cheap, trashy magazine, and you go to the beach. And you know, you like get your phone out, you try to Instagram. I don't know. You just try to like enjoy yourself and chill out and not be an intellectual. And and so, you know, I went out here and I did that. I did the vacation thing. And then I met Uncle John. And Uncle John, he's a traditional farmer. He's holding in his hands kalo, ancestral kalo, also known as taro. And in their creation story, they transform from kalo to become the people that they are now. And it grows in freestanding water. And their people, traditionally Hawaiians, were like 8 feet tall, y'all. And they were that tall because this was their primary staple in their diet. It's all protein. And they actually take it and they grind it up and they ferment it and they make what's called poi. It's like this purple, it looks like a purple mashed potato pudding, and it tastes fermented like kimchi. It's like, it's intense. But it's like something that Hawaiians eat all the time. And in 2002, the University of Hawaii decided that they wanted to genetically modify kalo so that it could be more resistant to pesticides in water. And Uncle John and a group of farmers got together and decided that they were not going to allow the genetic modification of the plant that they believe that they come from. And it took 10 years, but through indigenous resistance, they were able to stop that from happening. So actually, Hawaii was the first state that ever banned GMOs. Cool, huh? And Uncle John, though, he shocked me when he told me about how tourism and how people coming to the island impact his ability to be who he is. So if you look at Hawaii right now from Google Earth, you'll see all around the islands like this crazy film. It looks like this translucent, oily film. And that film is suffocating the islands. It's suffocating the coral reef. The fish are dying. The plants are dying. And guess what that film is? Anybody have a guess? Yes? Yes! It is suntan oil. Suntan oil is killing the coral reef, where almost 60% of the indigenous population that lived under the sea of both plants and sea creatures is now extinct because we want to get a tan. And so Uncle John remembers what it was like even 20 years ago, being able to use the water that comes down from the mountain when it was clean. Being able to go fishing back when there was fish that weren't sick from agricultural runoff and suntan oil. And it made me realize, you know, like even when I'm on vacation, I'm on indigenous land, and the way that I am living is impacting another group of people's ability to live the way that they would like to live. And so we have to ask ourselves, do I believe that my life is more important than another person's life? And if the answer is no, I believe that I'm a man amongst men or a woman amongst women, I believe that we deserve equal opportunity, then we have to actually evaluate the way that we're living. Isn't that crazy? Suntan oil. Okay, next idea. Are you guys still with me? You guys are kind of a quiet audience. Are you guys like shy? Do you guys want to laugh a little bit? Should we practice laughing? Let's practice laughing. Go like this. Do it again. Do it like this. Go. All right, thanks. All right. So there's no such thing as an American Indian. Popular belief systems. Christopher Columbus, being confused, tried to begin calling us something that we're not. You know, this is a photo of one of my favorite heroes. His name is John Trudell. He's a Lakota activist and poet, and God bless him. He walked into the woods this last year in San Francisco, where I took this picture. I was super starstruck when I met John at his home in the Mission. I grew up reading all of his poems. I'd admired the occupation of Alcatraz. A bunch of natives in the 60s went and tried to take back Alcatraz because actually there's a federal statute that says that if federal land isn't being used, natives can have it back. That's cool, huh? And, you know, I listened to all his music, and I just think he's a really cool guy. And so when I met John, I had a really hard time bumbling out a sentence. I was like, John Trudell, and John was like, you seem really worked up. You should smoke a little bit of this weed. You know, he's also a huge advocate for cannabis and the healing properties of cannabis, and He's an activist. We're not talking about Barack Obama here. Anyway, that's not the point. So I asked John, I'm sorry, Dean, President, I'm not advocating for cannabis, it's cool. I don't know, it's not legal in Florida, is it? Anyway, so I asked John the question I asked all of my Project 562 participants. I said, what does it mean to be an Indian? Because I don't even know if I really know what that means. And John said, we're not Indians. We're not Native Americans. We're older than both concepts. We're known as the human beings in our languages. And he looked at me and he said, do you know who you are? And I was like, oh man, John, that's real deep. I don't really know if I know who I am. I'm still trying to figure that out. And he said, okay, where are you from? I said, well, I'm Swinomish and Tulalip. What does that mean though? Well, it means we're Stahobschut, we're the people of the tide. And he said, Matika, you can never be something you never were. So we've done this to people of color in this country. We give them a pan-identity. We give them a new identity. So like when the colonizer came here, the idea was that our identity also had to shift. So we had to go from being Stahobs, or from the people that live within the four sacred mountains, or the people that live within by the blue-green water. We are our Anishinaabe, we're Dene, we're Lakota. We have complex understandings of ourselves. And those identities are always inextricably connected to the land. So what we find is that the land is essential to our identity. And so why do so many American citizens feel the need to take Prozac? Why are more Americans unhappy? Because this land that they are living on is not their ancestral territory for many Americans, and their connection to land is not telling them about their primary responsibility as human beings. So when you grow up in a place with a strong sense of stewardship and connection to land, you feel, when you have your coming of age ceremonies in that land, you feel a responsibility to take care of it. You never question your purpose. You know who you are. You come from that place and you take care of it. That's your life, your responsibility. But what if you don't have that responsibility? You have to learn to foster that relationship. And if the land is essential to our identity, what does that mean for Native people that are losing connection to that land as a result of those living amongst them? So here's Colin Soto. He's Kokopah. He's from, Kokopah is the last tribe right along the Colorado River, right before you get to Mexico. It's like, there's like nothing out there, man. You're like way out there. All you see is like strawberry fields for days. But Colin told me like this thing, when I first heard it, it just like, it totally shook me. Man, he told me about growing up in a mud house. Traditionally, that's how they would, it's like a traditional type of adobe stucco. He remembers like going fishing with his family. He remembers when the river would come through their valley and it would flood in the wintertime, and they would take water from the river and irrigate into their fields, and they grew corn, beans, and squash. He remembers a community style of living where you live amongst people that you love, you're close to your grandparents. And then he remembers when the river was dammed, right? When the Colorado River was dammed so that we could create power for cities in the middle of the desert like Phoenix and Los Angeles and Las Vegas. And then he remembers after the river was gone when people had to move out of those style of homes and move into government housing. They call it HUD housing. They had to switch from eating traditional foods and indigenous foods, thank you, to eating government foods, government cheese, white flour. And then he looked at me and he said, Matika, to be Kokopah is to be the people of the blue-green water. But how can we be the people of the blue-green water when the water no longer flows? So this is a more visceral and compelling style of environmentalism. Yes?
How many people people in that tribe live there?
There's about 700 or 7,000 people in that tribe. Yeah.
No longer stay there?
They live there, they just don't live there the way that they used to live there. Yeah. And so like this idea of environmentalism is not like, let's just protect the earth. I'm not talking about eating granola and becoming hippies and all of you eventually going to Burning Man. I mean, Burning Man is fun, I went. It's a lot of naked people, but that's not the point. The point is that what I'm discussing, this style of environmentalism, I'm talking about the protection of identity. The protection of the very thing that gives us life. You see, we've compartmentalized it as though we aren't reliant on the earth for our own survival. We can't go on without breathing and drinking and eating. We need the earth, and the earth needs us right now more than ever. And what I found all over the country is Native people at the forefront of almost every environmental protection, major protection movement in the United States. So I saw it here, at home in Lummi Nation. Thousands of people protested a coal export from going on top of their sacred land, because if the coal export came through here, it would deplete the salmon, and how can you be the salmon people without the salmon? I saw it in Oak Flats in Arizona, where thousands of Apaches have gathered here at what's called Hell's Hole 40. And this place is called Hell's Hole 40 because after Geronimo was captured, he was kept in a prisoner of war camp for nearly 50 years here in this place. And the only time that Geronimo was allowed to leave is when they came and put him on the train and took him to Wild West shows around the country. But this is a place where over 18,000 Apaches were kept for that many years. It's a crazy place, and several died there, and Apaches do not want infrastructure on top of this place where so many people have been buried. We see it here, in fact, in Miccosukee, in the Everglades, in a place that is known as the place of the free-flowing water, where at one point Miccosukees and Seminole people could live in palapas in the Everglades and go fishing, and the water was so clean that you could drink straight from it. And now, after major agricultural businesses in cities like Tampa and Hollywood and Miami and Fort Lauderdale, where all of the agricultural runoff and pesticides is filtered, not through state land, but through tribal land, you now are in a place where the Everglades are so polluted that it's not recommended that you eat anything out of there. In a mere 100 years, the population in Florida has completely decimated an ecosystem that is only found here in Florida. For progress, I don't know, it's crazy, but there are so many Miccosukes and Seminoles that are in need of support and allies to try to restore the Everglades. And of course, we see it happening in Standing Rock, North Dakota. So, have you guys heard about this? Yeah. You guys know about this? Yeah. Okay, do you guys know about why this place matters to the people? Has anybody told you the story? Yeah, it's a burial ground. So these people are known as Hunkpapa. They're called the Hunkpapa people. And in their original creation story, in the Hunkpapa creation story, have you guys ever looked up at the Big Dipper and you know there's like the elbow of the Big Dipper where it looks like there used to be a star? Well, when that star fell, it landed here in Hunkpapa territory, and it gave life and light to the people. And the first gift that the Creator gave after that star fell was the gift of water. So from this place sprung 3 rivers, the Missouri River, and I can't remember the other 2. And where that star fell, the water whirls like this, and it creates these incredible sandstones that are circular. The second gift given from the Creator, the circular stone. That's why it's called Standing Rock, because the cavalry used to use those perfect circular rocks in their cannons. And that's why that town that's near there is called Cannonball. And right here on top of this hill where that star fell, it's not just a sacred burial ground. It's like, I don't know, what is sacred to Christians? The Vatican, the Garden of Eden, if they knew where it was, Jerusalem. It's like a beginning place. It's like, if you've been to a church, it's a place of reverence. It's a place where you go to pray, where you go to fast. It's a place where you go and you put the most honorable of those that receive an honorable burial ground. Could you imagine if we decided we were going to put a pipeline through Gettysburg, how people would respond? They'd be outraged. So what's happening in Standing Rock, it's not just we're against big oil companies. It's not only that we need to find more sustainable energy sources. It's this idea that if we don't protect who we are, what are we leaving for our children, right? So anyway, I was out there. I've been out in Standing Rock a couple times. I'm going back on Saturday. And I was out there when the first big thing, on September 2nd, which was Labor Day weekend, you know, like the Dakota Access Pipeline came to the tribe, and they said to the tribe, man, we were out there and we found bones. We found a femur bone, we found a skull, right where we're supposed to be putting the pipeline, and we thought that you Indians might want to go out there and, you know, do what it is you do, make your prayers. And so we, of course, filed an injunction to stop the pipeline from going there, called the Tribal Historic Preservation Office. They confessed. It was decided on Tuesday that surveyors would go out to see if, in fact, it is a cultural burial site, because if it is, there are laws in place to protect those sorts of sacred sites in this country. And the Dakota Access Pipeline decided that they wanted to get rid of that evidence. So on that Saturday, September 2nd, when protesters went there to pray for those very bones, Dakota Access Pipeline workers showed up to desecrate those burial sites. And this is what happened that day. Huh. Aha. So that, like, I'll show you later.
Most of us women, we linked arms and we went up to the front line and we started pushing through, and we weren't like literally pushing, we were just walking, and this guy comes, he's a private contractor security, and he started spraying her, and then he started spraying right along everyone who was linked up.
We're gonna find out how to get to see my whole body all hot.
What's your name? Where are you from?
We're in Flying Horse from Willard, South Dakota.
And they set dogs on us, and they started spraying on us before I got sprayed. I've seen dogs bite people indiscriminately, including Dakota Access Pipeline workers.
I was just going toward a truck with my dog, and then the guy just leaned out and pepper sprayed me. Thankfully, he didn't hit my dog, but I just got mace all over my ass.
So those kids that were yelling at the end were the primary igniters of this movement. They're your age. They're younger than you. And they decided to start the camp with one auntie to say, no, we don't want this to happen. And then they decided to run from Bismarck, North Dakota, all the way to Washington, D.C. to deliver a letter to President Obama to ask him to stop the Dakota Access Pipeline. The last time that dogs were used on peaceful protesters was in 1963 in Selma. the last time that water cannons were used on protesters was down here in the South, in the streets, on black people that were fighting for civil liberties. What is happening right now in North Dakota goes beyond environmental concerns. It goes beyond one pipeline. At this point, it's about the protection of basic human civil liberties and dignity. So that's just one day of an ongoing battle. It's happening every day. Over 1,000 people have been arrested. After I put out this video, it got 5 million hits on YouTube. YouTube and Facebook took it down as like inappropriate, and then there was an arrest warrant out for me. We got it squashed. Obviously, you can't arrest journalists, but they are arresting journalists. And my sister last week, after getting sprayed with water cannons and getting hypothermia, she was kept in jail in a dog kennel for 2 days. When she got out, she had a number on her arm, like the Holocaust or something. It's so unreal what's happening. And now the Army Corps of Engineers has issued a mandatory evacuation of the Osheti-Shikowi camp, which is this camp right here on the riverbanks, where over 11,000 Native people and non-Native people are camped. And people have said that they're not going to leave. So this Saturday, or maybe Monday, we're not sure, there's going to be a very large standoff between Native people and between over-militarized police. They're showing up in fully militarized gear, and protesters are showing up without guns, with prayer. And so more than ever, I think this isn't what I do. I don't consider myself an activist. I consider myself a storyteller. But we need your help right now. We need you to get involved in whatever way you possibly can, because people are terrified. A girl lost her arm last week. Another girl lost her eyes because they shot both of her eyes with rubber bullets. She's like 18 years old. 70% of Indian kids in North Dakota have dropped out of school because the racial contention in public schools is so high that kids don't feel safe. So we need you. So if you guys want to talk more about this, after I'm done with the lecture, I'll be happy to do that. Or you guys want to take a picture? I love to take pictures in different universities of kids and send it to water protectors. People's spirits are low right now, so it helps when they feel, even just like somebody saying like, yo, we're with you, we support you, we'll help you if we can, that helps. It helps people feel better and less alone when they're being attacked by the police. Yeah. So what we have to realize is that the way that we treat our land and the way that we're willing to penetrate the land for her natural resources, unafraid of the consequences, that sort of thinking is what is directly related to the way that we treat our women. So 3 out of 4 Native women in this country experienced sexual assault or domestic violence in her lifetime. 3 out of 4. We are the most victimized in North America. It is compounded in areas like North Dakota, Wyoming, Montana, in places where there's man camps that are extracting fossil fuels. But the truth is that Native women aren't the only women in this country that are violated. 1 out of 5 women in this country experienced sexual assault in her lifetime. So the way that we are willing to treat our women is directly related to the way that we are willing to treat the earth. They're not separate from one another. In fact, our policies are interconnected. And so the kind of stories that I've been hearing from our women, they're super hard to tell. Like this grandma told me about how she went into an IHS clinic, Indian Health Service clinic, to have her first baby. And then she came out and she was never able to conceive again. She couldn't figure it out, only to realize years later that she was one of the women that was sterilized without her consent, victims of a de facto one governmental policy. During the 50s and 60s and 70s in this country, over half of Indian women were sterilized without their consent. So there has been, at a policy level, an attempt to eradicate Native America. And so even though this is like a very strong part of our narrative and our story, we also know I've been able to meet so many women, amazing women, who have transformed that narrative and who, despite those sort of awful stories and that reality, have prospered. They survive. They become intelligent, integral parts to our community moving forward. Women like this one, like Deb Parker, who, and that's Deb in the background, and that's her daughter, Kaya George, and those are our hats. In the Northwest, you'll always see us wearing hats. We wear cedar hats because when we travel in our canoes, it rains there all the time, you know, so it's like, it makes sense. But Deb was the vice chairwoman of our tribe for a long time, and she's ran a women's shelter in Tulalip for a very long time. And she was very purposeful in changing the Violence Against Women's Act. So what would happen, how we got to this place, is that a non-Indian would hurt a woman in our community, and then he wouldn't be able to be prosecuted in our tribal courts. So, you know, the police would collect the evidence, and then we didn't have jurisdiction over non-Indians in our tribal courts. So then it would get brought to the neighboring jurisdiction, and then it would get thrown out for unsubstantial evidence because it wasn't collected by their own police officers. So there was this like long ongoing loophole where perpetrators weren't prosecuted. And so it was decided, look, we have to have the right to prosecute non-Indians when related to sexual assault. That doesn't seem unrealistic, does it? Oh, we ran into so many problems with Congress, so much opposition. They called it a slippery slope. If we allow you Indians to prosecute non-Indians, then what comes next, was the argument. And so they asked Deb, several lobbied on this issue, and Deb was one of the women that went before Congress and testified on the day that they were making the decision. And she said she tried to use the power of a good mind, spiritual logic and reason and honest storytelling to change their minds. She told them about what happened to her, what it felt like to be molested as a child and to never had experienced justice, and what it's like for her women that she takes care of in the tribe. It's powerful, you can Google it. And somehow she changed Congress's mind, and then they voted and they changed VAWA, and since then, our numbers have been declining. So it's really funny. I got into this argument with this guy last night, and he said, oppression isn't a real thing, marginalization isn't a real thing. You brown people need to stop complaining about it and get over it. It's not like you don't have equality. You all have the right to vote now, and you all you have free taxes, and you guys have casinos, and you guys have equal opportunity. You need to get over it. And I was like, oh my God, like it's such a strong argument, and I didn't really want to argue that. But what needs to be said in that conversation is like that policies like this is how we got to places, you know, so until we change the policies, nothing changes. Cool, huh? That the policy was able to be changed? Do you guys have class to go to? Okay, how much time do we have left? I don't even know how long I'm supposed to be speaking. 5 minutes. Let me tell you something before you all go. Man, I want to tell you about, which one do I want to tell you? I want to tell you this story before you go. I want to tell you about the one thing that I've been able to see, which is amazing to me, is this cultural resurgence all over Indian country. And how, even though despite these sort of stories, this sort of trauma that I've talked to you about, we're able to survive, you know? I mean, I've been to about 60 universities in the last 30 days. I've been all over the country, University of Chicago, NYU, down here in Florida, Seattle, California, Midwest. I've been everywhere. And I've heard crazy stories on college campuses since the election of Donald Trump. One girl told me about how they grabbed her lady bits in an elevator and said, it's a new America, get used to it. Another kid told me at the University of Chicago of how her hijab was ripped off, and the kid said, all you Muslims are gonna have to leave this country, you're terrorists, we know it. Another kid told me about how he came back to his dorm room and there was racial slur and colonial flags down his dorm room floor that said, "We're building the wall and you're going to have to leave." Awful, awful stories. I've heard presidents say that we support free speech. We have to acknowledge that there's a difference between free speech and hate speech. We have to acknowledge collectively as a people that if we're not a part of the solution, we're a part of the problem. And you know, I don't know what it's like here on this college campus. I don't know how you brown kids feel on campus. I don't know if you feel safe. But I do know that I've heard all over the country brown kids tell me that they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe in America. They don't feel safe on campus. And the policies on the campuses that they live in don't support them. And, you know, I never know what to say at these things. But I do want to tell you that, you know, despite where we're at right now, we've endured these sorts of things before. We are able to actually participate in socially changing this environment. And I want to tell you that, you know, that we don't intend to leave you, you know, that you're not alone. And I want to tell you that we'll protect you, we the grown folks, that will stand with you, that will stand with your Muslim families, your same-sex parent families, your gay students, your black families, your female students, your Mexican families, your disabled students, your immigrant families, your trans students, your native students. We want to tell you that we won't let anybody hurt you or deport you or violate your body without first having to contend with us. That this is not 1972 or 1952 or 1802. That we are now in a time where we have the resources and the intelligence to protect you. And before I leave you, I'd like to ask all of you to do something for me, which is I'd like to ask you to become peacemakers. You know, like becoming a peacemaker, you know, can happen as a nation, and it can happen as a community. And we as individuals can make conscious decisions to lay down our weapons, like the peacemaker did here in this country thousands of years ago. We can lay down our weapons of divisiveness. We can lay down our weapons of racism, our weapons of fear-mongering. We can lay down our weapons of discrimination, and we can choose instead to become protectors and peacemakers of one another. We can begin forming concentric circles of interconnectedness and protecting one another. So I'm going to close with a prayer song. You know, like I'm not really a singer, so don't make fun of me. But but you know, where I'm from, we don't bring good minds together without first acknowledging the collective spirit and without sending off people in a good way. So I know maybe you guys don't pray. For those of you that don't, that's cool. But for those of you that do, I ask you to say a prayer for our communities. Say a prayer for Standing Rock. Say a prayer for your family, for their safety. Say a prayer for the people that you love and you care about. And pray for yourself to be of a good mind, to feel good, and to feel strong, and to have hope, and to be fearless in a time where fear is very much amongst us. And so this song I'll sing you, it's a prayer song. It comes from a house it. Anine means I'm inviting the spirit and the creator into the room. And it's like inviting the creator to help you be of a good mind. So stand with me and pray with me. And if you want, you can sing with me. Okay. Ready? Okay. Anine ha, anine ha, anine ha, anine ha. Anine Hanine. Tigrit seed, thank you. Okay, now before you go, do something for me. Turn to somebody next to you. Find somebody next to you, say, yo, I'm gonna protect you. Shake their hand, look them in their eyes, say, I got you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. All right, you guys, thank you so much for coming today, and follow my Instagram.